They called her naive, the judge's daughter who believed a man's promises, who walked by the river holding on to words instead of warnings. Adeline Carter thought love would find her worthy. Then came the night Andrew Whitford chose wealth over her heart, humiliating her before Boston's elite with a single question that would haunt her for months. But what no one knew, not even the man who shattered her, was that the most powerful duke in America was watching, and he saw something in her that would change everything. The spring air carried the scent of magnolias through the open windows of the Carter residence, but Adeline barely noticed. She stood before her mirror, adjusting the modest silk ribbons in her dark hair, her reflection showing a young woman of 23, with intelligent hazel eyes, and a face that, while not classically beautiful, held something deeper. Character. Her father always said she had character. She could hear her mother downstairs, directing the servants with the precision of a military general preparing for battle. Tonight was important. The Whitford ball. Adeline's stomach fluttered with an emotion she had tried to suppress for weeks, ever since Andrew Whitford had started paying her particular attention. Her lady's maid Sarah appeared in the doorway holding the gown they had chosen together. It was pale blue, simple but elegant, befitting the daughter of Judge Richard Carter, one of New England's most respected jurists. "You look lovely, Miss Adeline," Sarah said, fastening the tiny buttons along Adeline's spine. Adeline smiled, but the expression didn't quite reach her eyes. She had learned long ago not to expect too much. Her family was respectable, certainly. Her father's reputation was impeccable. But they were not wealthy, not by the standards of families like the Whitfords, who had made their fortune in shipping and railroads. Still, Andrew had sought her out. At the spring garden party, he had walked with her away from the crowds. They had discussed poetry, literature, the changing seasons. His hand had brushed hers as they walked by the river, and he had looked at her with such intensity that her breath had caught in her throat. "You are not like the other young ladies, Adeline," he had said. "You have substance, intelligence. I find myself drawn to conversations with you in a way I never expected." Those words had sustained her through 2 weeks of careful courtship. 2 weeks of hope blooming in her chest like the spring flowers surrounding them. The carriage ride to the Whitford mansion seemed both too long and too short. Her mother chatted about guest lists and social connections, while her father sat quietly, occasionally patting Adeline's hand with paternal affection. He knew his daughter's heart, perhaps better than she knew it herself. The Whitford estate blazed with light, every window glowing like a promise. Music drifted from the ballroom as they ascended the marble steps. Adeline's heart hammered against her ribcage, and she pressed one gloved hand against her stomach, willing herself to breathe normally. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of silk and jewels, of carefully coiffed hair and practiced smiles. Adeline searched the crowd for Andrew's familiar face, that sandy hair and easy smile that had made her believe in possibilities. She found him near the orchestra, but he was not alone. A woman stood beside him, resplendent in emerald green silk that must have cost more than Adeline's entire wardrobe. She was beautiful in the way that wealth made beautiful, with perfect posture and practiced grace. Diamonds glittered at her throat, her wrists, her ears. "Miranda Howe," her mother whispered, her voice carrying a note of warning. "They say she came from New York with a dowry that could buy half of Boston." Adeline felt something cold settle in her stomach. She watched as Andrew leaned close to Miss Howe, saw the way his hand lingered at the small of her back, the same gesture he had used with her by the river, the same intimate positioning that had made her feel chosen. Miss Carter. Adeline turned to find Andrew approaching, Miss Howe on his arm like a trophy. His smile was warm, but something in his eyes had changed, something calculating that she had been too naive to see before. "How lovely to see you," he said, his voice carrying just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I do not believe you have met Miss Miranda Howe, recently arrived from New York." Adeline curtsied, her training overriding her instinct to flee. "A pleasure, Miss Howe." Miranda Howe's smile was practiced perfection. "Likewise, I am sure. Andrew has told me so much about Boston society." The emphasis on society felt deliberate, a reminder of hierarchies and worth measured in bank accounts rather than character. Andrew's eyes traveled over Adeline's simple gown, and something like pity crossed his features. It twisted into something worse. Amusement. "Still attending balls, Miss Carter," he said, his voice taking on a tone that made her skin prickle with warning. "I had thought perhaps you might have other obligations by now." "Other obligations, sir?" His smile sharpened. "Marriage, of course. Though I suppose at your age one might wonder about prospects." The words hung in the air like smoke. Around them, conversations quieted. Faces turned toward them with the predatory interest of those who sensed blood in the water. Andrew Whitford's voice rose just enough to ensure an audience. "Tell me, Miss Carter, are you still unattached? Still, what is the phrase, a spinster in waiting?" The words hit her like a physical blow. She felt her face flush, heat crawling up her neck. Around them, she heard the rustle of silk, the whisper of voices barely contained. Laughter, polite and poisonous, rippled through the crowd. Miranda Howe's hand tightened on Andrew's arm, a gesture of possession. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes gleamed with victory. Adeline's throat closed. She should say something, anything, but the words stuck behind the humiliation, behind the sudden understanding that everything Andrew had said to her by the river had been lies. Pretty lies told to entertain himself while he waited for something better to come along. Her mother materialized at her elbow, her face carefully blank. "Come, Adeline, your father wishes to speak with you." It was an escape, and Adeline took it. She curtsied to Andrew and Miss Howe, somehow maintaining the practiced grace her mother had drilled into her since childhood. Her legs felt wooden as she walked away, aware of every eye following her, every whispered speculation. In the corridor outside the ballroom, she finally allowed herself to breathe. Her mother said nothing, simply produced a handkerchief and pressed it into Adeline's trembling hands. "He is not worth your tears," her mother said quietly. But Adeline was not crying. The tears would come later in the privacy of her room. What she felt now was something harder, colder, something that crystallized in her chest like ice. She had been naive, foolish. She had believed that intelligence and character mattered as much as dowries and diamonds. She had thought Andrew saw her for who she was and valued it. Instead, he had humiliated her before Boston's elite, marking her as unwanted, as lesser. As that most pitiable of creatures, a woman passed her youth with no prospects. The drive home passed in silence. Her father squeezed her hand once, his eyes filled with a sorrow that only a parent who had failed to protect their child could feel. Her mother stared out the window, her jaw tight. In her room, finally alone, Adeline stood before her mirror once more. The same face looked back at her, the same hazel eyes. But something inside had shifted, had hardened. She would not make this mistake again. She would not believe in pretty words or gentle touches by the river. She would not open her heart to the possibility of love, because love, she now understood, was a luxury afforded only to those with the right connections, the right dowry, the right last name. Adeline Carter removed her simple gown and folded it carefully. Tomorrow she would wake up and face a world that had witnessed her humiliation. She would hold her head high, maintain her dignity, and never, ever allow a man to make her feel small again. But tonight, in the darkness of her room, she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth that Andrew Whitford had revealed. In the eyes of society, she was exactly what he had called her, a spinster, without prospects, without value beyond what a wealthy man might grant her. She did not know, as she finally closed her eyes against the moonlight streaming through her window, that everything was about to change, that within weeks she would meet a man who would see her differently, who would look at her intelligence and her character and recognize something rare. She did not know that the Duke of Hawthorne was already in Boston, attending political dinners and quietly observing the young women of society with an eye far more discerning than Andrew Whitford's. And she certainly did not know that Frederick Davenport had been at the ball that night, standing in the shadows near the terrace doors, and had witnessed every moment of her humiliation, or that he had noted the way she held herself together, the grace with which she retreated, the strength it took not to break in public. The Duke of Hawthorne saw many things that others missed, and Adeline Carter, he decided, was worth a second look. The days following the Whitford ball carried the weight of whispered scandal. Adeline maintained her composure through pitying glances and stopped conversations, learning to keep her chin high even as Boston society dissected her humiliation over tea and gossip. Her father noticed the change in her. One evening in his study, Judge Richard Carter set down his newspaper with deliberate care. "Your mother received an invitation this afternoon. Governor Ashford is hosting a political dinner next week. The Duke of Hawthorne will be there." Adeline looked up from her book. She had heard of Frederick Davenport. Everyone had. The man who inherited a failing dukedom at 25 and transformed it into one of America's most prosperous estates. Known for brilliance, coldness, and impossibly high standards. "He is unmarried, is he not?" her mother said from the doorway. 32 and still without a duchess. "Because he finds most young ladies too frivolous," her father replied, "too concerned with fashion over substance. The man has turned down every eligible woman in 3 states. "He sounds insufferable," Adeline murmured. Her father smiled. "He sounds particular. There is a difference. I thought you might appreciate hearing him speak on agricultural reform, the kind of intelligent discourse you value." The night arrived with soft spring rain. Adeline chose a wine-colored silk gown, telling herself it was obligation, not vanity. The governor's mansion glowed with gaslight, windows reflecting gold onto wet cobblestones. Inside, the gathering was intimate. Politicians, businessmen, intellectuals who shaped policy over port and cigars. Adeline stayed close to her father, aware of polite nods and unspoken thoughts about Andrew Whitford's rejection. Then she saw Frederick Davenport. He stood near the windows, whiskey in hand, listening to Governor Ashford. Tall with dark hair silvered at the temples despite being only 32. Strong features, almost severe, sharp cheekbones and a jaw suggesting discipline and determination. His eyes arrested her. Storm cloud grey-blue, intense, missing nothing. He wore evening clothes with absolute confidence, every inch of him speaking controlled power. "Intimidating," her mother whispered, but Adeline felt only curiosity. Recognition of someone else who held themselves apart from society's frivolous games. At dinner, Adeline sat midway down the table between her father and a banker's wife. Frederick Davenport occupied the place of honor beside Governor Ashford. Conversation flowed through trade, politics, elections. When agricultural reform arose, men offered shallow opinions, repeating rhetoric without understanding. Frustration built in Adeline's chest. "What of crop rotation?" she said, her voice carrying clearly. Conversation paused. Faces turned. Surely the issue is not simply which crops to plant, but maintaining soil fertility across seasons. European studies suggest a 4-field system, nitrogen-fixing legumes alternating with grain crops. Silence fell. Her mother's expression flickered with alarm. "You have read the German agricultural reports, Miss Carter?" The Duke's cool voice cut through the quiet, his storm-cloud eyes fixed on her with intensity that stole her breath. "I have, Your Grace. My father's library is extensive. I find practical application of scientific principles fascinating. Most young ladies find such topics tedious. Most young men do as well," Adeline replied, immediately regretting her boldness. Frederick Davenport's mouth curved slightly. "A fair point, Miss Carter. What is your opinion on the Liebig theory of mineral depletion? They discussed soil chemistry, sustainable practices, balancing profit with land stewardship." His questions tested her, but when she answered with knowledge rather than platitudes, respect flickered in his expression. "Few young ladies comprehend the impact of land management on economic stability," he said. "But you understand, Miss Carter. You see connections others miss." His gaze held hers. Something electric passed between them. Recognition of equal minds. Someone who valued substance over superficiality. The moment stretched, charged with assessment. Other guests watched in stunned silence. Governor Ashford looked pleased, her father proud, her mother shocked. For the first time since Andrew's betrayal, Adeline felt truly seen. After dinner, Adeline stood on the veranda breathing rain-washed air, heart hammering with exhilaration. "Impressive display, Miss Carter." Frederick Davenport emerged from shadows, moving with predatory grace. Cigar smoke clung to his shoulders, mixing with rain scent and sandalwood. He stopped beside her, not touching but close enough that she felt his warmth. "I hope I did not overstep, Your Grace. Women are not typically encouraged to speak on such matters, which is a remarkable waste of intelligence. Society's loss, not yours. She looked up at sharp features softened by gaslight. You do not find educated women threatening, then? I find ignorance threatening, Miss Carter. Intelligence I find refreshing, rare, valuable. The way he said valuable made her chest flutter. You are not what I expected, Your Grace. His storm-cloud eyes held amusement. And what did you expect? The rumors say you are cold, impossible to please, that you have rejected every eligible young lady because none meet your standards. I am particular about whom I allow into my life. I have responsibilities, a rebuilt estate, lands and people depending on my judgment. I cannot afford frivolity or weakness, and yet you engage with a woman society considers past her marriageable prime. Bitterness edged her words, carrying echoes of Andrew's mockery. Frederick's jaw tightened, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. Society is often wrong about value. I learned not to trust popular opinion when making important decisions. He turned to face her fully, his intensity overwhelming. I make my own assessments, Miss Carter. Intelligence, character, and capability matter far more than age or social standing. A woman who discusses crop rotation is worth 10 who only discuss fashion. Heat rose to her cheeks, but she held his gaze. You are frank, Your Grace. I find games tiresome. Life is too short for deception. They stood in charged silence, rain creating sound around them. Something weighted with possibility hung between them. Your father is a good man, he said finally. Honorable, fair. These qualities matter to me. He matters greatly to me. Family loyalty is also rare. Frederick studied her face as though memorizing her features. Then he stepped back. I suspect we will meet again, Miss Carter. I hope we do. He bowed and disappeared inside, leaving Adeline with her racing heart and rain sound. She did not know Frederick had attended specifically because the Carters would be there, that he had orchestrated seating arrangements, that he had been testing her, assessing if the woman he observed at the Whitford ball was as intelligent as he suspected. She had exceeded every expectation. Inside, Frederick stood in shadows, watching Adeline through rain-streaked windows, expression thoughtful. He had found what he was looking for. Now he simply had to determine if she would accept what he had to offer. Spring deepened into early summer, and Boston bloomed with possibility. Adeline found herself thinking of storm-cloud eyes and frank conversations more often than she cared to admit. Frederick Davenport had been different from any man she had known. Direct, honest, intellectually stimulating in ways that made her forget, briefly, the sting of Andrew's betrayal. She did not expect to see him again so soon. The theatre on Tremont Street was hosting a production of Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, and her father had secured tickets. Adeline dressed in pale lavender, her hair swept into an elegant arrangement that her mother insisted made her look sophisticated rather than spinsterish. The lobby glittered with Boston's finest. Adeline stayed close to her parents, nodding politely to acquaintances while ignoring the whispers that still followed her. 3 weeks had passed since the Whitford ball, but society had long memories for scandal. Miss Carter. The voice came from behind her, deep and unmistakable. Adeline turned to find Frederick Davenport in immaculate evening clothes, his presence commanding attention even in the crowded space. He bowed to her parents first, his manners impeccable. Judge Carter, Mrs. Carter. A pleasure. Then his eyes found hers. Miss Carter, I hoped I might see you here. Your Grace, Adeline managed, her pulse quickening. Are you fond of Shakespeare? When performed well. His mouth curved slightly. I find the comedy of misunderstanding particularly relevant to modern society. So many people hear only what they wish to hear. The observation felt pointed, almost intimate, as though he spoke of something deeper than theatrical entertainment. Her father cleared his throat. Your Grace, would you care to join us in our box? We have room. Frederick's eyes never left Adeline's face. I would be honored. The play unfolded with wit and romance, but Adeline barely followed the plot. She was too aware of Frederick sitting beside her in the dim theatre, his shoulder occasionally brushing hers. During the interval, he leaned close enough that she caught his sandalwood scent. What do you think of Beatrice, Miss Carter? Adeline considered carefully. She is intelligent, sharp-tongued, Society would call her difficult, but I find her honest. She refuses to pretend weakness she does not feel. And Benedict, a man who values wit over beauty, who recognizes an equal when he finds one. She paused, even if he resists admitting it at first. Frederick's expression held approval. Precisely. Sometimes the most valuable things require us to look past our initial assumptions. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. They were no longer discussing the play. 2 days later, Adeline walked in the public garden with her lady's maid trailing at a respectful distance. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance heavy in the warm air. She found a bench near the pond and sat, watching children sail toy boats while their nurses gossiped nearby. A remarkable coincidence. Frederick appeared on the path before her, perfectly composed as though their meeting was pure chance, though something in his eyes suggested otherwise. "Your Grace," Adeline said, rising to curtsy. Sarah, her maid, stepped back discreetly. "May I join you, Miss Carter?" At her nod, he sat beside her, leaving proper distance but somehow making the space between them feel charged. For a moment, neither spoke. The garden hummed with life around them. "I have been thinking about our conversation at the governor's dinner," Frederick said finally, "and again at the theatre. You have a rare quality, Miss Carter. Honesty. Intelligence without pretension. Character that society has failed to properly value." Adeline felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You are kind to say so, Your Grace. I am not kind. I am accurate." His voice dropped lower, more serious. "I came here today because I needed to speak with you away from curious eyes and listening ears." Her heart began to race. "About what, Your Grace?" Frederick turned to face her fully, his storm-cloud eyes intense. "About the future. Mine. Possibly yours." The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. Even the children's laughter faded into background noise. "I need a wife, Miss Carter. Not for romance or passion, though I would not object to either. I need someone intelligent enough to manage a vast estate, discreet enough to handle sensitive matters, strong enough to stand beside me rather than behind me. Someone I can trust with responsibilities that would overwhelm most women of our acquaintance." Adeline's breath caught. "You are proposing marriage, Your Grace." "I am proposing a partnership." Frederick's gaze held hers steadily. "I have observed you carefully, Adeline. May I call you Adeline?" At her stunned nod, he continued. "You are everything I require in a duchess. More importantly, you are everything I respect in a person. I will not insult your intelligence with false declarations of love. What I offer is honesty, security, respect, and the freedom to be fully yourself within the bounds of our arrangement." "And what would you require of me?" she asked quietly, her mind spinning. "Your intelligence, your discretion, your partnership in managing the Hawthorne estates. You would have authority over the household, control of your own finances, freedom to pursue your interests in reading and intellectual pursuits. I would expect you to stand beside me at social functions, to represent the duchy with dignity, and to be honest with me always." He paused, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "I would never humiliate you as Andrew Whitford did. I would never diminish your worth or treat you with anything less than the respect you deserve. On this, you have my word." The mention of Andrew sent a sharp pain through her chest. Frederick noticed immediately. "I was there that night," he said quietly. "At the ball. I saw what he did to you. I saw how you held yourself together with such grace, and I knew then that you possessed something far more valuable than beauty or wealth. Dignity, strength, the kind of character that cannot be purchased or faked." Adeline felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why me, Your Grace? Surely there are younger women, wealthier women, women without the scandal of public rejection attached to them. Younger women bore me. Wealthy women expect me to be grateful for their dowries. And as for scandal," Frederick's jaw tightened, "what Andrew Whitford did reflects his character, not yours. Society may whisper, but I make my own judgments. I choose you, Adeline, because you are exactly what I need. The question is whether I am what you need." She stared at him, this powerful man who had just offered her everything she thought she had lost. Security, respect, a position in society that would silence every whisper. But could she accept a marriage without love? After Andrew's betrayal, could she trust another man with even a piece of her heart? "I need time to consider, Your Grace." Frederick nodded, rising smoothly. "Of course. This is not a decision to make lightly." He reached into his coat and produced a card. "Send word to this address when you have decided." "But Adeline," he paused, his eyes holding hers with such intensity that her breath stopped. "I hope you will say yes. I believe we could build something meaningful together." He bowed and walked away, leaving her trembling on the garden bench. That evening, Adeline sat with her father in his study. She had told him everything, watching his face carefully as she explained Frederick's proposal. Judge Carter was quiet for a long time, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Finally, he spoke. "The Duke of Hawthorne is a good man, Adeline. Honorable, fair, perhaps cold to those he does not trust, but never cruel, never petty. He rebuilt his estate through intelligence and hard work, not exploitation. His tenants speak well of him, which tells me more than any society gossip could. But he does not love me, father." Her father smiled sadly. "Does that matter more than respect, than honesty? Your mother and I began as an arrangement, you know. Love grew between us over time, born from mutual regard and shared life. Perhaps that is a stronger foundation than passion alone." Adeline thought of Andrew, of passionate words whispered by the river that meant nothing when faced with a larger dowry. "And if love never comes," she asked quietly, "then you will have partnership, security, and the freedom to be yourself, which is more than most women of our class can claim." Her father took her hand. "But the choice is yours, my dear. I will support whatever you decide." The next morning, Adeline spoke with her mother. The conversation was different, focused on position and status, on becoming a duchess, on finally having the respect that Andrew's rejection had stolen. Her mother's excitement was palpable, almost desperate. But it was her father's words that echoed in Adeline's mind as she sat at her writing desk 3 days later. Respect, honesty, partnership, freedom to be herself. She thought of Frederick's intensity, the way he saw her intelligence as valuable rather than threatening, the way he had witnessed her humiliation and offered not pity, but partnership. Could she build a life with this man? A life without the promise of love, but with the certainty of respect? Adeline picked up her pen and began to write. "Your Grace, I accept your proposal. Adeline Carter." She sealed the letter before she could reconsider and rang for a servant to deliver it. The response came that same evening. Frederick's handwriting was strong, decisive. "Tomorrow at 2, my attorney's office. We will discuss arrangements. Until then, F." Davenport Adeline pressed the note against her chest, her heart pounding. She had made her choice. Now she would discover whether it was wisdom or folly. In his study across town, Frederick Davenport read Adeline's acceptance for the 3rd time. A smile ghosted across his features, rare and genuine. He had gambled on her intelligence, on her strength, on the character he had recognized beneath society's dismissive labels, and she had surprised him by accepting. Now came the real test. Could he offer her the partnership he had promised while guarding the heart he had learned long ago to protect? Could she accept respect without demanding love? Time, he supposed, would answer both questions. He folded her letter carefully and locked it in his desk drawer. The Duke of Hawthorne had found his Duchess. Now he simply had to prove he deserved her. The attorney's office smelled of leather and old paper, of documents that bound lives together with ink and signatures. Adeline sat across from Frederick in a high-backed chair, her mother beside her radiating barely contained excitement, her father's presence steady and reassuring. Frederick's attorney, a distinguished man named Mr. Pemberton, spread contracts across the mahogany desk. The Duke himself sat with perfect posture, his storm-cloud eyes occasionally meeting Adeline's as Pemberton explained the terms. Miss Carter will retain control of her personal property and any inheritance from her family. She will receive an annual allowance of $5,000 for her personal use, separate from household accounts. The Hawthorne estates will be jointly managed, with Miss Carter holding full authority over domestic operations and charitable endeavors. Adeline listened carefully, noting how generous the terms were. Frederick was giving her real power, real independence, not the hollow promises that many husbands made, but legally binding authority. Additionally, Pemberton continued, the Duke has established a trust in Miss Carter's name. Should anything happen to His Grace, Miss Carter will be provided for independently, with a residence and income for life. Her father leaned forward. That is more than generous, Your Grace. Frederick's gaze found Adeline's. I meant what I said about partnership, Miss Carter. These are not empty words. You will have security, independence, and the freedom to make meaningful decisions. I expect you to use that power wisely, but I will not second-guess your judgment. Something warm unfurled in Adeline's chest. He was giving her what most women of their class could only dream of: respect, trust, autonomy. The contracts were signed with careful precision. When Adeline's pen lifted from the final page, she felt the weight of her decisions settle around her like a cloak. There was no turning back now. Frederick rose and extended his hand. She took it, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. The wedding will be in 2 weeks, he said. Small, at Trinity Church. Only immediate family and close friends. I see no reason for excessive spectacle. Relief flooded through her. She had dreaded the thought of a grand society wedding, with Andrew and Miranda watching from the pews, with whispers following her down the aisle. That sounds perfect, Your Grace. His eyes held hers for a long moment. You may call me Frederick now, Adeline. We are to be married after all. The use of her first name, spoken in his deep voice, sent an unexpected shiver through her. Frederick. His mouth curved slightly, and something flickered in his expression. Approval, perhaps, or something warmer. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Her mother threw herself into planning with the fervor of a general marshalling troops. Adeline was measured for a wedding gown, fitted with new clothes appropriate for a duchess. Instructed on household management protocols she already understood. Frederick called twice at the Carter residence, always proper, always formal. But Adeline noticed small things. The way his eyes followed her across the room, how he listened when she spoke, really listened, as though her words mattered. The subtle protective positioning of his body when they walked in the garden, as though shielding her from the world's judgment. He brought her gifts, not jewelry or frivolities, but books. A first edition of agricultural treatises, a scientific journal discussing new irrigation methods, volumes on estate management written by European experts. I thought you might find these useful, he said during his second visit, handing her a leather-bound collection. A duchess should understand the land she helps govern. Adeline traced the embossed titles with wondering fingers. You continue to surprise me, Frederick. How so? Most men would bring flowers or trinkets. You bring me knowledge, tools to do my job well. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. I have no use for a decorative wife, Adeline. I need a partner who can think, decide, act. These books are not gifts. They are investments in our shared future. The practicality should have felt cold. Instead, it felt like respect, distilled to its purest form. The night before the wedding, Adeline stood at her bedroom window, watching moonlight silver the garden below. Tomorrow she would become the Duchess of Hawthorne. She would leave her childhood home and step into a life she had never imagined. Fear and anticipation warred in her chest. Frederick was everything Andrew was not: honest, honorable, respectful. But he had been clear about his expectations. Partnership, not romance. Respect, not love. Could she live with that? Could she spend her life beside a man who valued her mind but might never touch her heart? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Her father entered, his face gentle with understanding. Having second thoughts, my dear? Adeline turned from the window. Should I be? Judge Carter settled into the chair by her fireplace. Let me tell you something about the Duke that you may not know. 5 years ago, when he inherited the estates, they were drowning in debt. His father had been a profligate spender, more concerned with appearances than substance. Frederick could have walked away, let the properties fail, lived on his remaining fortune. But he did not. He did not. He spent 3 years living simply, working alongside his tenants, learning every aspect of estate management from the ground up. He paid off every debt, restored every failing structure, revolutionized every failing system. The people who work for him are loyal because he earned that loyalty through fairness and hard work. Her father's eyes met hers steadily. What I am saying, Adeline, is that Frederick Davenport is a man who honors his commitments, who values substance over show. If he promises you respect and partnership, he will deliver it. And perhaps in time, something more may grow. Adeline nodded slowly, feeling some of her anxiety ease. Her father was right. Frederick had proven himself through actions, not words. That was worth more than passionate declarations that meant nothing when tested. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, summer sun streaming through stained glass windows at Trinity Church. The ceremony was indeed small. Adeline's parents and closest family, Frederick's aunt and a few business associates, Governor Ashford, representing their political connections. Notably absent were the Whitfords and their circle. Adeline felt only relief. She wore ivory silk, simply cut but elegant, with her mother's pearl necklace at her throat. As she walked down the short aisle on her father's arm, her eyes found Frederick waiting at the altar. He was resplendent in formal black, his bearing powerful and controlled. But when he saw her, something shifted in his expression. His storm-cloud eyes warmed, and his mouth softened into what might have been wonder. For a moment, Adeline forgot to breathe. The ceremony proceeded with traditional solemnity. Vows were exchanged in steady voices, rings blessed and placed. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Frederick lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles with lingering reverence. The touch sent heat spiraling through her body. They signed the registry as sunlight painted golden patterns across the marble floor. Frederick's signature was bold and confident. Adeline's hand trembled slightly as she wrote her new name. Adeline Davenport, Duchess of Hawthorne. At the small reception in her parents' home, Frederick stayed close to her side. When guests approached to offer congratulations, his hand rested at the small of her back, warm and possessive through the silk of her gown. The gesture felt protective, claiming intimate in a way that made her pulse quicken. He introduced her with quiet pride. My wife, the Duchess of Hawthorne. As evening approached and guests began to depart, Frederick drew her aside into the library where this had all begun, where she had spent countless hours reading and dreaming of a future that seemed more certain now. Are you ready to leave, Adeline? She nodded, suddenly aware that tonight she would go to his home. To their home. That the theoretical partnership they had discussed would become reality. Frederick seemed to sense her nervousness. His voice dropped lower, gentler. I want you to know something. I will not rush you. Our arrangement does not require... He paused, choosing words carefully. Physical intimacy can develop in its own time. I will not pressure you. Relief and something else, something warmer, flooded through her. Thank you, Frederick. But then he did something unexpected. He reached up and touched her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with surprising gentleness. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Adeline's breath caught. You are beautiful, he said quietly, as though the words surprised him. I should have told you that earlier. At the altar, when I saw you, I forgot for a moment why we made this arrangement. I simply saw you. The intensity in his eyes made her heart race. This was not the cold, pragmatic duke discussing partnership. This was a man looking at his wife with genuine appreciation, perhaps even desire. Frederick, she whispered. He leaned closer, his sandalwood scent surrounding her, his breath warm against her skin. His eyes searched hers, asking permission without words. Adeline's hand rose to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and fast beneath her palm. She nodded, barely breathing. The kiss was soft at first, exploratory. His lips brushed hers with careful reverence, as though she were precious, fragile. But when she responded, leaning into him, his hand slid into her hair and the kiss deepened. Heat bloomed between them, surprising in its intensity. This was supposed to be a practical arrangement, but the way he kissed her felt anything but practical. It felt like hunger barely restrained, like desire tempered with respect, like the beginning of something neither had anticipated. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Frederick rested his forehead against hers. Perhaps, he murmured, his voice rough, this partnership may include more than I initially proposed. Adeline smiled, feeling something shift inside her chest, something like hope. Perhaps it may, Your Grace. He pulled back to look at her, his expression intense. "Frederick." "My name is Frederick, Adeline." "Use it." "Frederick," she repeated, and watched satisfaction flash in his storm cloud eyes. As they prepared to leave for the Davenport estate, Adeline felt the weight of her new life settling around her. She was no longer the rejected spinster, the judge's pitied daughter. She was the Duchess of Hawthorne, partner to one of America's most powerful men. But more than that, she thought as Frederick's hand found hers in the carriage, she might be something even more unexpected. She might be wanted, not for her dowry or connections or beauty, but for herself. The possibility terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The Davenport estate stretched across rolling hills like a kingdom unto itself. Adeline had gasped when she first saw it, the main house rising from manicured grounds with architectural grace that spoke of generations of wealth and power. But it was Frederick's private tour, showing her the estate operations with genuine pride, that truly impressed her. He had rebuilt all of this from near ruin. The knowledge deepened her respect for the man she had married. Their first week together established a rhythm. Mornings, Frederick worked in his study, while Adeline met with the housekeeper, learning the intricate workings of a ducal household. Afternoons, they rode the estate grounds together, Frederick explaining crop rotations and tenant relationships. Evenings, they dined together, conversation flowing easily about politics, philosophy, agricultural innovations. And each night, Frederick kissed her goodnight at her bedroom door. Gentle kisses that grew progressively longer, more heated, until Adeline found herself pressing against him, breathless, before he pulled away with visible restraint. "We have time," he would murmur against her hair. "No rush." But Adeline was beginning to think she wanted to rush. The invitation arrived on their 8th day of marriage, the Ashford Ball, Boston's premier summer social event. Black ink on cream paper, requesting the honor of the Duke and Duchess of Hawthorne's presence. Frederick found her in the morning room, studying the invitation with trepidation. "You do not wish to attend," he observed, settling into the chair across from her. "Everyone will be there," Adeline said quietly, "including people who witnessed my humiliation at the Whitford ball." Frederick's expression hardened. "Andrew Whitford will be there." It was not a question. Adeline nodded, feeling her stomach tighten. Frederick was silent for a long moment, his storm cloud eyes calculating. Then he leaned forward, his voice firm. "Listen to me, Adeline. You are the Duchess of Hawthorne now. You outrank every person in that ballroom except perhaps the governor himself. Andrew Whitford is nothing, a minor heir to a shipping fortune, married to new money desperately buying its way into society." His voice dropped lower, more intense. "But more than your title, you have something far more valuable. You have worth, intelligence, character, everything he failed to recognize. His loss, not yours." Adeline felt tears prick her eyes. "You make it sound simple." Frederick reached across and took her hand, his touch warm and grounding. "It is simple. You walk in on my arm, wearing the Davenport diamonds, and you show them exactly what they failed to see, that you were always worthy. They were simply too blind to notice." She looked down at their joined hands, at the wedding ring glinting on her finger. "Can you stay beside me?" The entire evening. His thumb stroked across her knuckles, sending shivers up her arm. "I would not dream of leaving your side, Adeline. You are my Duchess, my partner, and I protect what is mine." The possessive note in his voice made her pulse quicken. The night of the ball arrived with summer heat and anticipation. Adeline's lady's maid had spent hours on her appearance, but when Adeline finally saw herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The gown was deep sapphire silk that brought out the gold in her hazel eyes, cut to showcase her figure with sophisticated elegance. Her hair was swept up to reveal her neck and shoulders, secured with diamond pins, and at her throat, the famous Davenport diamonds blazed with cold fire. A necklace that had graced duchesses for 4 generations. She looked powerful, regal, untouchable. Frederick appeared in her doorway, resplendent in formal black. His eyes widened when he saw her, then darkened with something that made her breath catch. "Adeline," he breathed, crossing to her. "You are breathtaking." He circled behind her, and she watched in the mirror as he lifted a matching diamond bracelet. His fingers brushed her wrist as he fastened it, then lingered, tracing patterns on her sensitive skin. "Every man in that ballroom will envy me tonight," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "And they should. You are extraordinary." Heat flooded through her body. Frederick met her eyes in the mirror, and for a moment the air between them crackled with tension. Then he stepped back, offering his arm with formal precision. "Shall we, Your Grace?" The ballroom at the Ashford mansion blazed with 1,000 candles, music swelling as Boston's elite swirled across marble floors. As the Davenport carriage pulled up, Adeline felt her courage waver. Frederick's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "Remember who you are," he said quietly. "Remember what you are worth." Their arrival was announced with ceremony. The Duke and Duchess of Hawthorne. Conversation faltered. Heads turned. Eyes widened as they took in Adeline's transformation, the diamonds at her throat, Frederick's protective presence beside her. Adeline lifted her chin and walked into the ballroom as though she owned it. They were immediately surrounded by well-wishers. Governor Ashford congratulated Frederick warmly, his wife gushing over Adeline's gown. Others approached with carefully measured deference, recalibrating their assessments of the woman they had pitied just weeks before. Frederick stayed true to his word, never leaving her side. His hand remained at her waist, a constant warm pressure that grounded her. When they danced, he held her with assured confidence, guiding her through the steps with natural grace. "You dance beautifully," she said, surprised. "My mother insisted I learn despite my protests." He smiled slightly. "I am grateful for her stubbornness now." Their eyes met and held. The ballroom seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them moving in perfect synchronization. Adeline felt something shift in her chest, something warm and terrifying. She was falling for her husband. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it felt inevitable. The dance ended and Frederick led her toward the refreshment tables. And that was when she saw him. Andrew Whitford stood near the windows, his wife Miranda resplendent in emerald silk beside him. He was laughing at something another gentleman said, the same easy confidence he had always possessed. Adeline's steps faltered. Frederick noticed immediately, following her gaze. His expression went cold, dangerous. "Shall we say hello?" he murmured, his voice carrying an edge that made her shiver. Before she could respond, Andrew turned and saw them. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by confusion as he took in Adeline's transformation. They approached with measured grace. Andrew straightened, clearly uncertain how to proceed. "Whitford," Frederick said coolly, offering the barest acceptable nod. "Mrs. Whitford." "Your Grace," Andrew managed, bowing. He looked at Adeline, and she saw the exact moment he realized who she was. His face went pale. "Miss Carter." "No, I suppose it is Your Grace now. I had not heard—" "Heard what, Mr. Whitford?" Adeline asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "That you had married." He looked between her and Frederick, clearly trying to reconcile the woman he had dismissed with the Duchess before him. Miranda's expression had frozen into a rictus smile, her eyes calculating as she assessed the diamonds at Adeline's throat, the Worth gown, the powerful man whose hand rested possessively at his wife's waist. Andrew's mouth curved into something ugly, his voice rose just enough to carry. "Still attending balls then, Your Grace? Though I suppose your circumstances have changed since we last spoke." The words were barbed, designed to remind her of his mockery. "Still a spinster?" he had asked then. The memory stung. Adeline opened her mouth to respond, but Frederick moved first. He stepped slightly in front of her, his hand tightening at her waist in a gesture both protective and possessive. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but carried absolute authority. "You are speaking to my wife, Mr. Whitford, which requires considerably more respect than you appear capable of offering." The temperature in their immediate vicinity dropped 20 degrees. Nearby conversations stopped as people turned to watch. Andrew's face flushed red. "I meant no disrespect, Your Grace. I was merely surprised to see Miss Carter, that is the Duchess, looking so well." Frederick's expression could have frozen fire. "My wife has always looked well, Whitford. The failure was in your perception, not her worth. A man who mistakes a diamond for common glass reveals only his own inadequacy of vision." The cut was surgical, delivered with aristocratic precision. Andrew's flush deepened to crimson. Miranda's grip on his arm tightened, her smile now brittle. But Frederick was not finished. He turned slightly, drawing Adeline fully against his side, his other hand coming up to rest at the small of her back. The gesture was unmistakably intimate, claiming. "I should thank you, actually," Frederick continued, his tone conversational but his eyes deadly. "Your spectacular failure of judgment made it possible for me to find the most intelligent, capable, and remarkable woman I have ever known. One who comprehends estate management, agricultural reform, and political strategy better than most men of my acquaintance." He paused, letting his words sink in. "One who will stand beside me as we build something far more meaningful than social climbing and purchased prestige." The insult was clear. Miranda's new money origins, Andrew's shallow ambitions, their mercenary marriage, all dismissed with elegant contempt. Around them, the cream of Boston society watched with rapt attention. This was the Duke of Hawthorne, the most powerful man in the room, publicly championing his wife and destroying the man who had humiliated her. Andrew opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. Frederick's hand slid up Adeline's back, fingers splaying between her shoulder blades in a gesture of absolute possession. He looked down at her, and the warmth in his eyes took her breath away. "Come, my dear," he said, his voice softening for her alone. "I believe they are beginning another waltz, and I wish to dance with my wife." He guided her away, leaving Andrew and Miranda standing in shocked silence. As they reached the dance floor, Adeline looked up at Frederick, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "You did not have to do that." His arms came around her, pulling her closer than propriety strictly allowed. "Yes," he said simply, "I did. No one insults my wife. No one diminishes your worth. And certainly not some fool too blind to recognize treasure when it stood before him." "Frederick," she whispered, feeling tears threaten. His hand tightened at her waist. "You are mine, Adeline. My partner, my duchess, my wife. And I will spend every day proving to you that you made the right choice in accepting my proposal." They danced in silence for several measures, the music swelling around them. Adeline felt the eyes of the ballroom on them, felt the whispers starting. But for the first time she did not care. She was seen, valued, protected, claimed by the man who mattered most. When the dance ended, Frederick leaned close, his lips brushing her ear. "Take me home, Adeline." The words, innocent on the surface, carried weight that made her pulse race. She nodded, breathless. They made their farewells to Governor Ashford and departed, leaving behind a ballroom buzzing with speculation about the Duke's passionate defense of his duchess, about Andrew Whitford's humiliation, about the spectacular rise of the woman they had all dismissed. In the carriage, Frederick pulled Adeline against his side. She went willingly, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly. His lips pressed against her hair. "Always," he promised. "Always, Adeline." And in that moment, she believed him. Completely. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible? Like your worth depended on someone else seeing it? Drop a comment below telling me where you are listening from, and let me know if Adeline's journey is speaking to you. And if you are enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what happens next between Adeline and Frederick. Trust me, things are about to get even more intense. The morning after the ball, Adeline woke thinking of Frederick's devastating defense, his words echoing, "Take me home." At breakfast, he set aside his papers when she entered, rising to pull out her chair himself. His hand brushed her shoulder, sparking heat. "I trust you slept well?" "I did. Though I have been thinking about last night." His expression turned serious. "Do you regret what I said to Whitford?" "No." She met his eyes. "You showed me my own worth reflected in your eyes." Something softened in his features. "You have always had worth, Adeline. I simply made certain others could see it." In his study, Frederick showed her the household ledger with substantial funds. "You have complete authority over staff, entertaining, charitable endeavors. I trust your judgment completely." From a wall safe, he produced jewelry belonging to the Duchess of Hawthorne. "But I want you to have something solely yours." He opened a smaller box, revealing sapphires and diamonds arranged in elegant patterns. I had this commissioned before our wedding. The sapphires match your eyes in candlelight. The thoughtfulness moved her more than the obvious value. May I? He fastened it at her nape, fingers lingering warm against her skin. His breath ghosted across her shoulder as he inhaled deeply. Perfect, he murmured, voice rough. It suits you, my Adeline. The possessive endearment sent heat spiraling through her. Your Adeline, she repeated softly. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Mine, he confirmed, in every way that matters. He stepped back, control visibly reasserted. I have business this afternoon, but tonight, dine with me, just the two of us. I want to really talk, Adeline. That afternoon she met with Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper, reviewing operations and making suggestions that earned approval. Later, exploring the gardens, she discovered Frederick's private library. Inside a Wordsworth volume, his handwriting marked the margin beside a love poem. Adeline. Her heart stuttered. He had been thinking of her even before their marriage. Dinner was intimate, candlelit, just the two of them. Frederick wore less formal attire, making him more approachable though no less commanding. Conversation flowed easily from estate matters to philosophy. You see through pretense quickly, he observed. You knew who was genuine at the governor's dinner within minutes. My father taught me to observe carefully. What do I reveal, Adeline? She considered. Discipline, control. But underneath, passion held in check. You feel deeply, but guard those feelings. Raw emotion flickered in his eyes. You see me clearly. As you see me. He rose, extending his hand. Walk with me. On the terrace, night air fragrant with roses, Frederick kept her hand, thumb stroking patterns across her knuckles. When I proposed, I told myself I wanted practical partnership, someone intelligent to help manage responsibilities. I convinced myself I could maintain emotional distance, and now? He pulled her closer, only inches between them. Now I think of you constantly. Wonder what you are doing when we are apart. Look forward to our conversations with anticipation that has nothing to do with practicality. His hand cradled her face. You have become essential to me in ways I did not anticipate. It terrifies me because I swore never to allow anyone that power over my heart. Frederick, she whispered, tell me you feel it too. Tell me I am not alone in this. Her hands pressed against his chest, feeling his racing heart. You are not alone. I feel this pull between us, this need that grows stronger every day. Relief and desire mingled in his expression. Thank God. I thought perhaps I was losing my mind. He pulled her fully against him. Adeline gasped at the contact, at the heat of his body, at the evidence of his desire. I want to kiss you, he said roughly. Not careful goodnight kisses. The way I have been dreaming about, may I? Instead of answering, Adeline rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss ignited like flame. Frederick's control shattered as his mouth claimed hers with hunger building since their wedding. His tongue traced her lips, and when she opened for him, he groaned, tasting, exploring, devouring. Adeline's fingers tangled in his hair as he backed her against the wall, his body pressed against hers. One hand fisted in her hair while the other roamed her back, tracing her spine through silk. When they broke apart, breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. My beautiful, brilliant Adeline. Tears pricked her eyes at his reverence. I never expected this. This is so much more than I planned, so much more than I deserve. But I am selfish enough to want it, to want you, all of you. His lips found the sensitive spot below her ear. Adeline gasped, head falling back. He kissed down her neck, across her collarbone, hands continuing their exploration. Come inside, he murmured against her skin. Let me show you how much you mean to me. She met his eyes, seeing the question there, the careful restraint. She thought of the careful man who proposed partnership, and the passionate man holding her like she was precious beyond measure. Yes, she whispered, take me inside, Frederick. His eyes blazed with heat and triumph and something like love. He swept her into his arms, carrying her through the house, past servants who quickly averted gazes, up the grand staircase to his chambers. The Duke of Hawthorne had found far more than a capable partner. He had found his match in every possible way, and tonight their partnership would become something infinitely more meaningful than either had imagined possible. Morning light filtered through silk curtains, painting patterns across unfamiliar walls. Adeline woke slowly, awareness returning in fragments. The weight of an arm across her waist, the warmth of a body pressed against her back, the steady rhythm of breathing against her neck. Frederick. Memory flooded back. His chambers, his bed. The night they had shared, tender and passionate, reverent and consuming. He had touched her as though she were precious, worshipped her with hands and lips and whispered words that still made her pulse race. "You are extraordinary," he had breathed against her skin. "Mine. Finally mine." Now, in the soft morning light, she felt his lips brush her shoulder. She turned in his arms to find him watching her, storm-cloud eyes warm with satisfaction and something deeper. "Good morning, my Adeline." The possessive endearment sent warmth through her chest. "Good morning, husband." His hand came up to trace her face, thumb brushing across her lips. "I have imagined waking beside you since our wedding night. The reality exceeds every expectation." She smiled, feeling bold in the intimacy of his bed. "Only exceeds. Perhaps I should try harder." His eyes darkened with heat. "Careful, Duchess. I have responsibilities today that require me to leave this bed eventually. If you tempt me further, I may never fulfill them." Adeline pressed closer, feeling his immediate response. "Would that be so terrible?" Frederick groaned, his control visibly straining. "You are dangerous, wife. Absolutely dangerous." But he kissed her anyway, deep and thorough, until they were both breathless and the morning was half gone. The following days established new rhythms in their marriage. Frederick no longer left her at her bedroom door with chaste goodnight kisses. Instead, they shared his chambers, his bed, nights that blurred into mornings with whispered conversations and languid touches. But it was the small gestures during daylight hours that affected Adeline most profoundly. She found flowers on her breakfast plate. Not formal arrangements, but wildflowers from the estate grounds, chosen specifically for their meaning. Forget-me-nots, roses, violets that spoke of faithfulness and devotion. The card beside them read simply, "For the woman who occupies my every thought. F." Books appeared in her private sitting room, volumes she had mentioned wanting, agricultural treatises for their work together, poetry collections with passages marked in Frederick's bold handwriting, each inscription personal, intimate. "For Adeline, who reads the world with more precision than any scholar I have known. To my wife, whose intelligence challenges and inspires me daily. For my partner in all things." He left notes in unexpected places, tucked into her correspondence, slipped between the pages of books she was reading, written on small cards left on her pillow when he rose before her. "I watched you sleep this morning and wondered how I existed before you. Come find me when you wake. I have something to show you. Your Frederick." The intimacy of it, the consistent attention, undid something in Adeline's carefully guarded heart. Andrew had courted her with pretty words that meant nothing. Frederick courted her with actions that proved everything. One afternoon, she worked in the estate office reviewing tenant concerns when Frederick appeared in the doorway. He said nothing, simply crossed to her desk and set down a leather journal. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside, detailed plans for a school on the estate. Not a simple country schoolhouse, but a proper educational facility with separate rooms for different ages, a library, space for practical training. "You mentioned wanting to improve education for tenant children," Frederick said, leaning against the desk. "I had the architects draw plans. What do you think?" Adeline stared at the careful drawings, throat tight with emotion. "You listened." "I always listen to you, Adeline." His hand covered hers, where it rested on the plans. "Your ideas matter. Your vision for this estate matters. I want to build this together." She looked up at him, this powerful man who had given her not just his name, but his respect, his attention, his heart. "I love you," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Frederick went very still. His eyes searched hers, storm clouds clearing to reveal something that made her breath stop. "Say it again," he commanded softly. "I love you, Frederick." "I did not plan to." I told myself this was partnership, respect, but somewhere between your honesty and your gestures, and the way you see me, I fell completely in love with you. He pulled her from the chair and into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Thank God, he murmured against her hair. I have been in love with you since the governor's dinner, perhaps before. Watching you debate agricultural policy with such intelligence and passion. I knew then I would never find another woman like you. He pulled back to frame her face with both hands. I love you, Adeline, desperately, completely. You have transformed my life, my home, my heart. Their kiss was different now, flavored with declarations and promises. When it ended, Frederick rested his forehead against hers. Come riding with me. I want to show you something. They rode across the estate, summer sun warm on their shoulders. Frederick led her to a hilltop overlooking acres of farmland, workers visible in distant fields. He dismounted and helped her down, keeping his hands at her waist even after her feet touched ground. This is yours, he said quietly. All of it. Not because you married me, but because you have earned it. The tenants speak of your fairness, your intelligence. They come to you with problems because they trust your judgment. You have made this estate a home, Adeline. Not just for me, but for everyone who lives here. Emotion tightened her throat. She had not expected this, had not expected to find purpose, belonging, love in what began as a practical arrangement. Frederick's hands slid around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest. They stood watching the estate spread before them, his chin resting on her shoulder. I want to give you everything, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Not jewels or gowns, though you will have those. I want to give you purpose, partnership, the freedom to build something meaningful. I want to watch you transform this estate with your vision. I want to grow old beside you, watching our children run through these fields. Children, Adeline repeated softly. She felt him smile against her neck. Many children, if you are willing. Sons and daughters who inherit your intelligence and hopefully my discipline, though I suspect they will wrap me around their tiny fingers the way their mother has. His hands spread across her stomach, the gesture intimate and possessive. Someday soon, I hope. Heat flooded through her at the implication, at the image of carrying his children. She turned in his arms to face him. Take me home, Frederick. His eyes darkened with immediate understanding. We are miles from the house, my love. I do not care. Take me home, now. The ride back was swift, both of them tense with anticipation. Frederick helped her dismount and immediately pulled her against him, kissing her with fierce hunger before they even reached the house. Servants scattered as he led her up the stairs, his intent clear. In his chambers, he closed the door and turned to her with eyes blazing. I love you, he said, already reaching for the buttons of her riding habit. I will love you every day for the rest of our lives. Adeline helped him with her clothing, her own fingers working at his coat, waistcoat, shirt. When they were finally skin to skin, she felt the rightness of it settle deep in her bones. This was love. Real, consuming, transformative love. Frederick lifted her easily, carrying her to the bed they now shared. His kisses traced patterns across her skin, worshipping every inch of her. His hands followed, learning her curves with reverent attention. You are so beautiful, he breathed, settling between her thighs. So perfect. Mine. Yours, she agreed, arching into his touch. Always yours, Frederick. Their joining was slow and deep, eyes locked, breathing synchronized. Adeline felt tears slip down her temples at the intensity of it, at the overwhelming rightness of being loved by this man. Frederick kissed away her tears, his own eyes suspiciously bright. I never knew, he whispered. I never knew it could be like this. Neither did I, she managed, her body moving with his in perfect rhythm. When release swept through them both, Frederick buried his face against her neck, her name a prayer on his lips. Adeline held him close, feeling complete in ways she had never imagined possible. Afterwards, tangled together in silk sheets, Frederick traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. I want to take you to the city next week. There is a lecture series on modern agricultural techniques. I thought you might enjoy it. Adeline laughed softly. Postmen take their wives to the theatre or opera. You are not most wives, and I am not most men. His hand slid down her arm to lace fingers with hers. Besides, Afterwards, we can attend whatever frivolous entertainment you wish. I simply want to share the things that interest us both." She turned to face him, struck again by how well he understood her. "That sounds perfect." His fingers tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender. "Everything about you is perfect, my Adeline. From your brilliant mind to your compassionate heart, to the way you look at me like I am worth something beyond my title and wealth. You are worth everything, Frederick." His kiss was soft, lingering. "As are you, my love. As are you." They spent the afternoon in bed, talking and touching, making love again with the slow thoroughness of people who had all the time in the world. Frederick told her about his childhood, his difficult relationship with his father, his determination to be different. Adeline shared her own dreams, her fears, her hopes for their future. As evening approached, they dressed for dinner, but Frederick kept pausing to kiss her, to touch her, as though he could not bear even momentary separation. "You have bewitched me completely," he said, fastening her necklace while pressing kisses to her nape. "I have become quite useless for anything except thinking about my wife." Adeline smiled at him in the mirror. "I consider that a worthy accomplishment, Your Grace." His eyes met hers in the reflection, warm with love and desire and complete devotion. The Duke of Hawthorne had found not just a duchess, but the other half of his soul, and every gesture, every touch, every whispered word proved it. 3 weeks had passed since their wedding, but it felt like a lifetime. Adeline stood in the morning room reviewing correspondence when Mrs. Patterson appeared, expression carefully neutral. "Your Grace, the Duke asked me to inform you that he will be late returning from town today. He is visiting the school site for tenant children." Adeline's heart warmed. Frederick had not only approved her plans for the school, but thrown himself into the project with characteristic intensity. He consulted architects, interviewed potential teachers, ensured every detail met the highest standards. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I will wait dinner for him." But Frederick did not return for dinner. The sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, and still no word. Adeline tried not to worry, told herself he was simply delayed by business matters. Yet unease settled in her chest. At 9, she heard horses. Relief flooded through her as she moved to the window, watching Frederick dismount. But something was different. His movements were weary, his shoulders tight with tension. She met him in the entrance hall. He looked up at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Not exhaustion, something deeper, something vulnerable. "Frederick, what happened?" He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms without a word. For long moments, he simply held her, his face buried against her hair, breathing her in like she was oxygen itself. "Come upstairs with me," he said finally, his voice rough. "Please, Adeline, I need you." In their chambers, he removed his coat and waistcoat with mechanical precision. Adeline watched, concerned by his unusual silence. Frederick was always controlled, but this felt different, like control barely maintained. She went to him, placing gentle hands on his chest. "Talk to me." He covered her hands with his, eyes closing briefly. "I went to the tenant school site as planned. Everything progressed well, but on the way back, I passed the old Carter estate, Adeline's childhood home. Her family had sold it last year after her father's retirement, moving to a smaller property in town. The new owners are renovating," Frederick continued, his voice strained. "They had workers clearing the gardens, and I saw them destroying the rose arbor beside the river, the place where Whitford courted you with his lies." Understanding dawned. Oh, Frederick. His hands tightened on hers, his storm cloud eyes opening to reveal raw emotion. "I stood there watching them tear it down, and all I could think was that you walked there with him, that he made you believe his pretty words, that he had the chance to love you and threw it away for money and status." A muscle worked in his jaw. "And then I thought about how close I came to never meeting you. If I had not attended that ball, had not witnessed his cruelty, had not been at the governor's dinner, when you spoke about agricultural reform with such passion and intelligence. If any single moment had been different, you would not be standing here with me now." The vulnerability in his voice shattered something in Adeline's chest. She reached up to cup his face, feeling the tension thrumming through him. "But I am here," she said softly. "Right here, Frederick. with you. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. When I proposed to you, I told myself it was practical, that I needed a capable partner to manage the estate, that I could maintain emotional distance while building a functional marriage. He laughed, the sound bitter and beautiful at once. I was lying to myself even then. From the moment you spoke at that dinner, challenging conventional wisdom with such intelligence, I was lost. When I watched Whitford humiliate you at the ball, I wanted to destroy him, not because it was wrong, though it was, but because he hurt something precious that I already considered mine. Adeline's breath caught, tears gathering in her eyes. I have spent 3 weeks with you, Frederick continued, his voice breaking slightly. 3 weeks watching you transform this estate with your vision and compassion. 3 weeks of conversations that challenge and inspire me. 3 weeks of holding you in my arms and thanking God for the miracle of you choosing me. His forehead pressed against hers, his breathing ragged. And today, standing beside that ruined arbor, I realized something that terrified me. You have become essential to my existence, Adeline. Not just important, not just valued, essential. You have transformed my house into a home, my careful plans into dreams, my controlled life into something wild and beautiful and unpredictable. A tear slipped down his cheek, and Adeline caught it with her thumb, her own tears falling freely. I love you, he whispered, the words fierce and broken. I love you so completely that the thought of existing without you feels impossible. You have taken my carefully constructed walls and demolished them entirely, and I'm terrified because I have never allowed anyone this kind of power over my heart. His lips found hers in a kiss that tasted of salt and desperation and love so profound it hurt. When they separated, both trembling, Adeline held his face between her hands. Listen to me, Frederick Davenport. You are not alone in this terror. I love you just as completely, just as desperately. You have given me everything I thought I lost when Andrew humiliated me. Purpose, respect, partnership. But more than that, you have given me yourself, your intelligence, your strength, your surprising tenderness. She smiled through her tears. You think you demolished your own walls? You demolished mine too. Every careful defense I built after Andrew's betrayal, every promise I made myself never to trust a man's words again, you destroyed them all with your actions, with your honesty, with the way you see me, truly see me, and value what you find. Frederick's hands slid into her hair, tangling in the carefully arranged curls, scattering pins across the carpet. You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known, he breathed, and I will spend every day of our lives proving that to you. Their kiss deepened, transforming from desperate to consuming. Adeline's fingers worked at his shirt, needing to feel his skin against hers, needing the physical connection to match the emotional intensity crackling between them. Frederick's hands found the buttons of her gown, unfastening them with trembling fingers. The silk whispered to the floor, followed by layers of undergarments, until they stood skin to skin in the lamplight. His eyes traced over her with reverence and hunger. You are so beautiful, he murmured, his voice rough. But it is not your beauty that captivates me, Adeline. It is everything you are. Your mind, your heart, your extraordinary soul. Show me, she whispered. Show me what I mean to you. Frederick lifted her easily, carrying her to their bed. He laid her down with such care as though she were infinitely precious, then covered her body with his own. His weight pressed her into the mattress, solid and real and perfect. Their joining was different from previous times, slower, deeper, weighted with confession and vulnerability. Frederick's eyes never left hers as he moved inside her, each thrust deliberate and profound. I love you, he said with every movement, mine, forever mine. Yours, Adeline gasped, her body arching to meet his. Always yours, Frederick. His hand found hers, fingers lacing together as he pressed their joined hands into the pillow beside her head. The intimacy of it, palm to palm while their bodies moved in perfect synchronization, brought tears to her eyes. Frederick kissed them away, his own eyes bright with moisture. You undo me completely, he breathed. Everything I was before you seems hollow now, meaningless. His free hand slid between them, finding the place where their bodies joined, stroking until Adeline cried out his name. Her release swept through her like wildfire, and Frederick followed immediately, groaning against her neck as he buried himself deep. They lay tangled together afterwards, hearts racing, breathing slowly returning to normal. Frederick rolled to his side, pulling Adeline against his chest, one leg thrown possessively over hers. "Stay with me always," he murmured against her hair. "Promise me, Adeline, no matter what comes, no matter what challenges we face, promise you will stay beside me." She turned in his arms to face him, seeing the vulnerability still raw in his expression. "I promise," she said firmly. "Through everything, Frederick, I am yours, and you are mine. That is not something I will ever walk away from." Relief transformed his features. He kissed her softly, thoroughly, then with growing heat. When he pulled back, his eyes had darkened again with renewed desire. "Again," he said simply, "I need you again, Adeline. I need to feel you, taste you, hear you say my name. I need proof that this is real." She smiled, reaching up to trace his lips with her fingers. "Then take me again, husband. Take me as many times as you need. I am not going anywhere." They made love twice more that night, each time different, once with playful passion that had them both laughing between kisses, once with slow, tender reverence that brought tears to both their eyes. Dawn found them still awake, wrapped in each other's arms, talking quietly about dreams and fears and the future they would build together. "I want to give you everything," Frederick said, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare back. "Not just wealth and status. I want to give you joy, Adeline, purpose, a life filled with meaning and love and partnership in all things you already have," she assured him. "Every day with you is a gift I never expected." He pressed his lips to her forehead, holding them there. "You have transformed me," he whispered, turned the Duke of Hawthorne into simply a man desperately in love with his wife. Adeline pulled back to look at him, seeing the softness in his features that was reserved only for her. "Then I consider my work here a success." His laugh was warm and genuine. "Come, my love, the sun is rising and we have an estate to manage together." But he did not release her immediately. Instead, he held her close, breathing in her scent, memorizing the feel of her in his arms. The Duke of Hawthorne had found his weakness and his strength in the same extraordinary woman, and he would guard both with everything he had. Summer deepened into early autumn, painting the estate in shades of gold and crimson. Adeline stood at the window of their shared chambers, watching Frederick ride across the fields with his estate manager, discussing the harvest. Even from this distance, she could see his commanding presence, the way workers straightened when he approached, respect evident in every interaction. Her husband, her partner, her love. The transformation in their marriage was visible to everyone. Servants smiled knowingly when Frederick refused breakfast meetings because he wanted to dine with his Duchess. Tenants commented on how the stern Duke softened whenever his wife appeared. Even Mrs. Patterson had mentioned with approval that the house felt truly alive for the first time in years. At night they shared not just a bed, but their deepest thoughts. Frederick told her about estate concerns, asked her opinion on business decisions, valued her input on every important matter. During the day they worked side by side, reviewing accounts, visiting tenants, planning improvements. But it was the small moments that revealed the depth of their connection. The way Frederick's hand always found hers when they walked, how his eyes tracked her across any room they occupied together, the subtle touches in passing, fingers brushing her waist, lips pressing briefly to her temple, hands squeezing her shoulder. He could not seem to keep from touching her, and Adeline loved it. "Your Grace," Mrs. Patterson said, appearing in the doorway. These invitations arrived from Boston, the mayor's autumn ball and the governor's harvest celebration. Adeline accepted the heavy vellum envelopes, knowing Frederick would leave the decision to her. They had attended several events since the Ashford Ball, always together, always presenting a united front. Society had watched with fascination as the cold Duke of Hawthorne transformed into an attentive husband who clearly adored his wife. "We should attend both," Frederick said that evening, reading over her shoulder. "Show them that we are not hiding." She leaned back against his chest, his arms coming around her waist. "Andrew will likely be at the mayor's ball." "Good," Frederick said, his voice carrying an edge. "Let him see what he lost." Let him see what we have built." The night of the mayor's ball arrived with October's crisp air. Adeline wore emerald silk that brought out the warmth in her complexion, the Davenport diamonds at her throat, and confidence that came from being thoroughly loved. Frederick appeared behind her as she fastened her earrings, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. "Breathtaking," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. "Every man there will envy me tonight." She turned to face him, adjusting his cravat. "And every woman will envy me, the most powerful man in America, and he is mine." His eyes darkened with possession. "Completely yours," he confirmed, pulling her close for a deep kiss that threatened to make them late. The ballroom blazed with light and music. Their arrival caused the usual stir, conversations pausing as people turned to watch the Duke and Duchess of Hawthorne. Frederick kept Adeline's hand tucked into the crook of his arm, his other hand covering hers possessively. They circulated through the crowd, greeting acquaintances, accepting congratulations on their obvious happiness. Adeline noticed the changed attitudes. Where once she received pity and condescension, now she received deference and respect. The Duchess of Hawthorne held real power, and society recognized it. "Your Grace," Governor Ashford approached with his wife. "You both look wonderfully well. Marriage clearly agrees with you." "It does indeed," Frederick said, his eyes finding Adeline's with warmth that made her pulse quicken. "My wife has transformed everything." His wife smiled, leaning close to Adeline. "We have never seen the Duke so happy, my dear. You have worked a miracle." As they moved deeper into the ballroom, Adeline spotted Andrew and Miranda near the refreshment tables. Andrew looked thinner, his face carrying lines of tension that had not been there months ago. Miranda's expression was tight, her smile brittle as she clung to her husband's arm. Frederick noticed her attention and squeezed her hand. "Shall we say hello to the Whitfords? Must we?" He smiled, sharp and dangerous. "I want to, actually. I have something to say." They approached with measured grace. Andrew straightened when he saw them, recognition and something like dread crossing his features. Miranda's smile became fixed. "Whitford," Frederick said coolly. "Mrs. Whitford, I trust you are both well." "Your Grace," Andrew managed, bowing stiffly. "Duchess, you look lovely this evening." "My wife always looks lovely," Frederick said, his tone mild, but his eyes cold. "Though I appreciate you finally recognizing what you once failed to see." The barb landed cleanly. Andrew's face flushed, but Frederick was not finished. He turned slightly, drawing Adeline more fully into the shelter of his arm. "I wanted to thank you again, Whitford. Your spectacular failure of judgment at that ball last spring was the best thing that could have happened." Andrew's jaw tightened. "Your Grace, I do not think—" "No," Frederick interrupted smoothly. "You did not think. That is precisely my point. You looked at this extraordinary woman and saw only that her dowry was smaller than Miss Howe's. You failed to recognize intelligence, character, capability. You chose money over substance." He paused, his voice dropping but carrying clearly to those nearby who were listening with rapt attention. "I chose substance, and I gained everything. A partner who manages my estates with brilliance. A wife who challenges and inspires me. A woman who has transformed my house into a home, and my careful existence into something worth living." Frederick's hand slid from Adeline's waist to the small of her back, the gesture unmistakably possessive. "My world begins and ends with her, Whitford. Every success I achieve because she stands beside me. Every joy I experience because she shares it. I wake each morning grateful for the gift of her presence. And I will spend every day of our lives ensuring she knows her worth." The silence around them was absolute. People had stopped pretending not to listen, watching with fascination as the Duke of Hawthorne publicly declared his devotion to his Duchess. Adeline felt tears prick her eyes, even as pride swelled in her chest. Frederick was not just defending her honor. He was celebrating her, claiming her, showing everyone what real love looked like. Andrew's face had gone from red to pale, his expression stricken. Beside him, Miranda looked like she wanted to disappear. But Frederick was not cruel enough to continue. He had made his point. "If you will excuse us," he said, already turning away with Adeline. "My wife promised me the next waltz, and I intend to hold her to it." On the dance floor, Frederick pulled her closer than propriety strictly allowed. The music swelled around them, but Adeline barely heard it. "That was extraordinary," she whispered. He smiled, genuine and warm. "You are extraordinary. I simply ensured everyone knew it." "I love you, Frederick, so very much." His hand tightened at her waist. "And I love you, my Adeline, more than words can adequately express." They danced in comfortable silence, awareness of each other eclipsing everything else. When the music ended, Frederick led her toward the terrace. "I want to leave," he said quietly. "I want to take you home and show you properly how much you mean to me." Heat flooded through her at the promise in his voice. "Then take me home, husband." The carriage ride seemed endless. Frederick kept her hand in his, thumb stroking patterns across her knuckles that promised what awaited them. The moment they reached the estate, he swept her into his arms and carried her up the stairs, both of them laughing like newlyweds. In their chambers, he undressed her slowly, reverently, pressing kisses to each bit of skin he revealed. When they finally came together, it was with the passion of established love and the tenderness of deep affection. "You are everything," he breathed against her neck as they moved together. "My partner, my love, my reason for everything." Adeline clung to him, feeling complete in ways she had never imagined possible. This was what she had gained by accepting his practical proposal. Not just security or status, but true partnership, genuine love. A man who saw her completely and loved what he found. Later, wrapped in his arms, she traced patterns on his chest. "Do you remember when you proposed? When you said you could not promise romance?" He smiled against her hair. "I was an idiot. I had no idea what I was offering to give up." "But you were right about one thing," she said softly. "You promised respect. And you have given me that every single day, in every single way." Frederick tilted her face up to his expression serious. "Respect, love, partnership, devotion. You have all of me, Adeline. Everything I am, everything I will ever be. It is all yours." She kissed him softly. "Then I am the richest woman in America." "No," he corrected, pulling her closer. "We are the richest people in America, because we have something money cannot buy. We have each other." Outside their window, autumn stars blazed in a clear sky. Inside, the Duke and Duchess of Hawthorne held each other close, grateful for the unexpected gift of finding true love in what began as a practical arrangement. They had started as strangers, negotiating a partnership. They had become partners, building a life together. And somewhere along the way, they had transformed into soulmates who could not imagine existing apart. The scandal that had marked Adeline as unwanted had led her to the one man who would love her exactly as she was. And that, she thought as sleep claimed her in Frederick's arms, was the greatest triumph of all. Winter arrived with the first snow, transforming the estate into something from a fairy tale. Adeline stood at the window watching flakes drift past, one hand resting on her stomach in a gesture that had become instinctive over the past weeks. She had suspected for a month, but waited to be certain before telling Frederick. This morning, the physician had confirmed what her body already knew. She carried the heir to the Davenport Duchy, a child conceived in love and growing beneath her heart. The door opened behind her, and Frederick's reflection joined hers in the window glass. His arms came around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder, in the familiar embrace that never failed to make her feel safe. "You have been quiet today, my love. Is something troubling you?" Adeline turned in his arms, studying his face. Storm-cloud eyes watched her with concern and devotion in equal measure. This man who had given her everything, who loved her with an intensity that still took her breath away. "Nothing troubles me," she said softly, taking his hand and placing it over her stomach. "But something wonderful is happening." Frederick froze, his eyes going wide. "Adeline, are you saying—" "We are going to have a child," she confirmed, watching joy transform his features. The physician confirmed it this morning. For a moment he simply stared at her. Then he swept her into his arms, spinning her carefully before setting her down and dropping to his knees. His hands framed her still flat stomach with such reverence that tears pricked her eyes. "A child," he breathed, pressing his forehead against her. "Our child." He looked up at her, and she saw moisture glistening in his eyes. "You have given me everything, Adeline. Purpose, love, a home that feels like sanctuary. And now you are giving me a family. I do not deserve you." She ran her fingers through his hair. "We deserve each other, Frederick. We built this together." He rose and kissed her with such tenderness that her heart ached. Then his hands were everywhere, checking her over as though she might break. "Are you well? Does the physician have concerns? What do you need? I will get you anything. Everything." Adeline laughed, catching his hands. "I am perfectly healthy. The physician says everything is progressing normally. I simply need you to continue being exactly who you are." Frederick pulled her close, one hand splaying protectively over where their child grew. "I am going to be a father," he murmured, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a son or daughter who will inherit your intelligence and hopefully my discipline. Or your stubbornness and my determination," Adeline teased. "God help us all," he laughed. "The child will rule the duchy by age 5. The months of her pregnancy revealed yet another side of Frederick. He became impossibly protective, insisting she rest more, worrying over every small discomfort. He read medical texts about pregnancy and childbirth, consulted with physicians, prepared the nursery with meticulous attention to detail. At night he would rest his hand on her growing belly, talking softly to the child within. "Your mother is the most extraordinary woman in the world," he would say. "You are so fortunate to have her." "As am I." Adeline would thread her fingers through his hair, heart full to bursting with love for this man who had transformed from cold duke to devoted husband to anxious father-to-be. Society watched their happiness with fascination. The Duke of Hawthorne, once so controlled and distant, could not hide his joy over his impending fatherhood. At social events, his hand never strayed far from his wife's expanding waist, his protection of her absolute. One evening at a dinner party, a matron made the mistake of suggesting Adeline looked tired and should perhaps rest more at home. Frederick's response was immediate and frosty. "My wife is radiant and capable of making her own decisions about her activities. I suggest you focus on your own concerns rather than offering unsolicited advice about matters you do not understand." The woman had retreated hastily while Adeline hid her smile behind her fan. As spring approached and her time grew near, Frederick became almost impossible to live with. He refused to leave the estate, cancelled all business trips, and hovered constantly. "I am not made of glass," Adeline said with exasperation, after he insisted on carrying her down the stairs for the 3rd time that week. "I know," he said, setting her carefully on the sofa, "but you carry something infinitely precious. Humor me, my love." When labor began on a warm May morning, Frederick transformed from anxious husband to determined protector. He refused to leave her side despite the midwife's protests that fathers traditionally waited elsewhere. "I am staying," he said flatly, holding Adeline's hand. "She needs me and I will not abandon her." Through hours of labor he remained steadfast. He wiped her face with cool cloths, whispered encouragement, held her hand through the worst contractions. When she screamed with pain, he did not flinch but pressed his forehead to hers. "You are so strong," he murmured, "so incredibly strong, my Adeline. I am in awe of you." At sunset, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the room with joy. The midwife placed the tiny, red-faced bundle in Adeline's arms, and time seemed to stop. "A girl," the midwife announced. "A healthy, beautiful girl." Frederick stared at his daughter with such wonder that Adeline's heart broke and mended simultaneously. Tentatively, as though afraid he might break her, he reached out to touch one tiny hand. Immediately, miniature fingers curled around his larger one. A tear slipped down his cheek, then another. "She is perfect," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold her?" Frederick accepted the bundle with trembling hands, cradling his daughter against his chest. She was so small in his arms, so fragile and perfect. He looked down at her with an expression of such pure love that Adeline understood she was witnessing the moment her strong, controlled husband fell completely in love with another woman. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your father, and I promise to protect you, guide you, love you every day of your life. You are already the second most important person in my world." The baby yawned, tiny and perfect, and Frederick made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. They named her Charlotte Eleanor Davenport, after both grandmothers. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's grey-blue eyes, a perfect blend of both parents. Frederick proved to be an unexpectedly hands-on father. Despite having nurses and staff, he insisted on being involved in every aspect of Charlotte's care. He would sit in the nursery for hours just watching her sleep, marveling at the miracle they had created. "She is extraordinary," he told Adeline repeatedly. "Have you noticed how she grips my finger? And the way she looks at me, as though she knows exactly who I am?" Adeline smiled, nursing their daughter while Frederick sat beside them. "You are besotted." "Completely," he agreed without shame. "I never understood how my heart could expand to love another person as much as I love you. But somehow it has. You and Charlotte are my entire world." Months passed, then years. Charlotte grew into a bright, curious child who wrapped her father around her tiny finger with ease. The fearsome Duke of Hawthorne could be found on hands and knees playing games, reading stories in silly voices, teaching his daughter to ride while hovering anxiously beside her pony. 2 years after Charlotte came James, a son with his mother's intelligence and his father's determination. Then another daughter, Grace, who proved to be the most stubborn of them all. The Davenport estate rang with children's laughter, with the sound of small feet running through halls once silent. Frederick's study was invaded by little ones demanding stories, or showing him important discoveries like interesting rocks or pressed flowers. One autumn afternoon, years after that first magical night when Adeline had accepted his proposal, she stood on the terrace watching her husband play with their children in the garden. Charlotte, now 6, was showing him something she had found. James toddled after them, determined to keep up with his older sister. Baby Grace dozed in her nurse's arms nearby. Frederick looked up and caught Adeline watching. Even from this distance, she saw the love blazing in his eyes. He said something to Charlotte, who nodded and ran toward her siblings, then crossed the lawn to his wife. "What are you thinking, my love?" he asked, pulling her into his arms. "That I am the most fortunate woman alive," she said honestly. "That a humiliation I thought would destroy me led me to the greatest happiness I could imagine." Frederick kissed her softly. "No, my Adeline. I am the fortunate one. You took a cold, lonely man and transformed him into someone capable of joy. You filled my house with love and laughter. You gave me children, partnership, a life worth living." He cupped her face tenderly. "That night at the Whitford ball, when Andrew rejected you, he gave me the greatest gift. He cleared the path for me to find you, and I will be grateful to him for that stupidity for the rest of my life." Adeline laughed through happy tears. "We found each other, Frederick. That is what matters." Their children's laughter drifted across the lawn as Charlotte taught James some elaborate game only she understood. Grace woke and demanded attention with a lusty cry that made both parents smile. "Come," Frederick said, taking Adeline's hand. "Our children need us." As they walked toward their family, Adeline reflected on her journey. She had begun as the judge's rejected daughter, the spinster mocked by society. She had married a stranger in a practical arrangement devoid of romantic promises. But somewhere between carefully negotiated partnership and passionate declarations of love, she had found her place, not just as a duchess, though she wore that title with pride, but as a wife, a mother, a woman who had transformed heartbreak into happiness. The world that once called her Spinster now called her the Duchess of Hawthorne. But the only title that truly mattered was the one Frederick whispered each night as he held her close. "My Adeline, my love, my everything." And she was. In the end, what seemed like devastating rejection became the catalyst for extraordinary love. Adeline learned that worth is not determined by who wants you, but by who truly sees you. That love built on respect and partnership grows deeper than passion based on pretty words. That sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as heartbreak. She had been called Spinster, unwanted, past her prime. But she became a duchess, a mother, a woman who found her power not in society's approval but in loving and being loved by a man who valued her completely. What title would you choose for yourself? Not the one given by others, but the one you claim through living fully and loving deeply. If this story touched your heart, Please leave a like so I know these tales of transformation and unexpected love resonate with you. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story about finding your worth, even when the world tries to diminish it. And comment below telling me where you are listening from tonight. What spoke to you most in Adeline and Frederick's journey? Your stories matter to me, just as Adeline's story mattered to her. Until we meet again in another tale, remember, you are worthy exactly as you are. The right person will see it. The right love will prove it. Good night, dear listeners. Sleep well.